Good afternoon, everyone. Morning, good morning. Good morning. I am really excited for you to join us today. Before I get into an intro, Yana wanted to make sure that I provide some announcements. Number one, the restroom is out that way. Number two, when we are done, please return your name tags because we recycle and upcycle here at Cal State Fullerton. All right? Yeah. And then now I have the pleasure of introducing our speaker today. Now, before I go into this really official bio, I want to let you all know that I did meet Irshad. I think it was 6-7 years ago. We took a road trip together accidentally. I was in an institution where Irshad was invited as the keynote speaker, and my job was to pick her up from Orlando and drive her to Tampa, and then drive her back. So we spent a lot of time together and got to know each other a little bit. And I think we both walked away feeling really inspired and motivated by the type of work that we both do. So when I thought about...
And you were fun, Cecil.
I mean,
I'm sure you still are.
I try to be. And so when I thought about how can we engage our campus in some sort of dialogue or some sort of skill building that goes back to the basics, but not just the skill basic, but the human basics, right? Of what it means to recognize our individual humanities as we navigate our world at a time that seems to be in turmoil, at a time that seems to be divided. I thought, how about my friend Irshad, right? And so I'm going to read this really fun bio because I get to say chutzpah. So here we go. So Irshad Manji is the founder of the Moral Courage College, which equips people worldwide to turn heated issues into healthy conversations and shared action. The recipient of Oprah's Chutzpah Award for boldness, Irshad is also an internationally best-selling author. Her latest book, Don't Label Me, How to Do Diversity Without Inflaming the Culture Wars. Fun fact, Chris Rock calls it a book of genius. We don't know how Will Smith feels about it yet. A professor of leadership at New York University for many years, Irshad now teaches with Oxford Initiative for Global Ethics and Human Rights. We do have the book for folks. We do have a couple of copies of the book for folks, so make sure you stick around. But everybody, please welcome Irshad Manji.
Thank you so much for having me here. Look, I know that these are tense times. Of course, I could have said that 5 years ago and it would be still true, right? I mean, the tensions are not going away, and sometimes they feel like they're getting even worse. But the reality is that, we have the chance, both individually and collectively, to turn what feels like calamity into opportunities for shared humanity. I want to turn your attention. I did not write this on the board or on the whiteboard, but I saw it as soon as I came in. How do we unify people even when we disagree? Now, obviously, we want you to share your thoughts, but before that, I'd like to actually ask the question slightly different way. Why should we care to unify people when we disagree? Any thoughts on that? Why bother to try unifying ourselves?
I think there's a lesson to be learned from everyone. We all have different upbringings. We've learned things differently.
Yeah.
So it's literally like, a lesson to be learned.
Lessons to be learned. Right. Now, the thing is, though, that sure, you have different experiences, or even if you have similar experiences as I do, you may have different interpretations of those experiences, right? Okay, so I might be able to learn from that, but damn it, I know I'm on the right side of history. I don't need to be learning from you, says Demon Irshad, says the Irshad of, I can honestly tell you, 20 years ago. I'll get into that in just a second. So what then? Why should I bother to seek unity, or better yet, create unity, when I know I'm on the right side of history and you're not?
I think it's important to break barriers.
Why?
We're so stuck in our ways, but it's a familiarity and like being comfortable in where you're at, and sometimes you have to get uncomfortable in order to learn and to grow.
But I just said, I'm not interested in learning from you because you're on the wrong side of history. Yeah.
Even when someone says they're interested in learning about whatever anybody else has to say, they're going to be limited in their ability to impact not only their community, but the community beyond that.
Can you unpack that just a bit more? Why are they going to be limited in their ability to have impact?
Relying just within their own immediate community, people, those they know, those who agree with them.
Yeah.
They're not going to be able to do anything. The example I use in my own community is any sort of environmental change. If you're only relying on those who agree with you, who are in your immediate circle, use that language, whatever, you're not going to be able to make that broader global change. You've got to get over yourself and be willing, but this is why I'm here, because it's hard to reach people who have that attitude. I don't want to know anything. I don't want to learn anything from people differently.
Right. First of all, yes to the both of you. Everything that you've said is very true. And I'm going to add, is that me? No? Okay. I'm going to add something more. And I'm going to use what you've just said as a springboard to it. If I believe I'm on the right side of history, whatever the issue is, and I am scorning and shaming and blaming because you're not, what I don't yet realize is that it's going to stop being about the issue for the person I'm shaming and blaming and scorning. It's no longer about the issue. Now it's about saving face. And so everything that I think I care about, which is why I'm so riled up, which is why I need you to agree with me, all out the window. Because the person I'm doing this to is going to walk away or leave this interaction feeling, I have nothing to learn from her. She has humiliated me. One of these days, I'm going to see to it that she feels the same way. And do you see how, therefore, the issue itself dies on the vine, right? So if we really care about the what, we need to care about the how. This brings me to the next question for all of you. Think about a time, and it may have been actually as early as this morning, when you had a conversation which maybe felt more like a confrontation, and you left feeling misunderstood. The question is, what got in the way of you being understood? 1, 2, 3-word answers. Yeah.
Personal biases.
Personal biases. Yours or theirs?
Probably both.
You know what? Thank you. Probably both. I love that you owned your piece of it. What else gets in the way? What got in the way in this scenario you have in your head? Krista?
Maybe not really listening,
Not really listening, yeah?
wanting to say based on what they said, but not really understanding the message.
So like reacting
Yeah.
more than responding. Okay? What else? In the scenario you have for yourself, what got in the way of you being understood? Yes.
Just yesterday, clothing, I was at my Russian Orthodox parish and had to leave immediately from there to the book festival and felt that clothing, because I didn't have time to change, got in the way of a conversation I wanted to have with an author there.
And can you give us just a wee bit more, like it was not modest enough, the clothing, or like what were you thinking?
At an Orthodox parish, it's very modest. So I mean, I usually have headscarf, long skirt,
That's right.
Covered,
Yep.
completely covered.
Yep.
I didn't have my headscarf on.
Right.
But, everything else was very, very conservative. And
Yeah.
when I brought up something I thought was a common point, she wrote a book about art. And there's a tremendous amount of art, old art, in various Orthodox parishes, but this one in particular, it's been around for over 100 years. And I wanted to bring that up, but as soon as I said Russian Orthodox, and then I think she related it to my clothing, I felt that shut down the conversation.
Interesting. Okay. So, and define this as you will, but first appearances.
First appearances, yeah.
Yeah, first impressions. Right. I think you had your hand up?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think the situation I'm thinking of, I got activated or triggered and then wasn't able to, kind of to Krista's point, like be present. So the situation I'm thinking of, that happened.
Right. So you got triggered.
Yeah.
Yeah, and lost focus
Yeah.
on the issue itself. Thank you again for owning that, you got in your way, as I often did in mine, with the story I'll share with you all. Anyone else? Yes, Kelly.
With my husband.
Ah. The partner has to come into it at some point.
I was triggered
Uh-huh.
by him. I said something to him, and he responded kind of flippantly without even turning to look at me.
Right. So disrespectful. Yeah? Oh, I can feel it for you right now.
So I said a bad word and I walked away. I came back later, but yeah, it shut everything down.
Of course it did. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Don't turn your back on me. Look at me. Yeah. Yeah, Mo.
I don't know how to frame this because I'm trying to be also accountable for myself.
Okay.
But I'm just going to say it and you can help.
Do it.
Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Thank you. So I want to say my gender often makes me feel misunderstood. I want to say my positionality at the university, for example, being an untenured faculty member, like I guess junior faculty member, even though I'm old. I'm still a junior faculty member, and I feel like that positionality, I don't get heard the same way that a senior colleague would get heard.
Right.
And I feel like power differentials, because of those two things together, and I can talk intersectional all you want,
Sure.
but because of those two things together,
Yeah.
I feel like either I'm spending 99% of my time making sure that I'm perceived a certain way, I'm not threatening, I'm not da 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 da, and then it doesn't work because then I'm not authentic, and then I misunderstand myself and everybody else misunderstands, and I'm trying so hard not to be offensive that I become offensive.
Oh my
Without
God.
needing to be offensive, you know what I mean?
I'm so tired right now.
I know.
I just need to put my head down on a pillow at this moment.
Please, that's why I brought a coffee with me. So, anyway, so that power differential, gender,
Yeah.
all those,
Yeah.
those structural things that
Yeah.
I don't have any control over.
Right. Okay, let's keep all of that in mind.
Sorry.
No. Could you please take that back?
I take it back. I'll eat my
Not sorry. Okay?
Not sorry.
It's your truth,
Thank you.
right?
Yeah.
Okay. I want us to keep everything that we've all said in mind, but I want to, really end the back and forth on this point, because I love what you said, that it's stuff I have no control over. And in many ways, you're right. But that does not mean we have no agency. And in fact, what this workshop is going to be about is figuring out what agency any of us has in most of the situations that we find ourselves in, where we're like, oh, I don't know that I can stick around for this. Because if we don't stick around for it, then we really don't have the opportunity to voice what needs to be said, right? So how do we stick around for it in a way that has integrity? And by integrity, I just mean wholeness, that I'm true to all that I am. All right. What I'd like to share with you now is the story of a time that lasted many, many years in my life, where I thought, I have no control over what other people say or do towards me. So I may as well just speak my truth. Years ago, shortly after 9/11, I wrote a book with a provocative title, more provocative than, in fact, I had bargained for. The title was The Trouble with Islam Today. The subtitle is A Muslim's Call for Reform in Her Faith. So it's not like I'm an ex-Muslim throwing rocks from the outside. No, very much rooted in my tradition and speaking from the inside about the need, I believe, for us Muslims, and yes, I know we can say this about every religious group, and frankly, every group, religious or not, the need to reform ourselves so that finally, what we demand of others, social justice, we are giving to one another as well. But timing, 9/11. After 9/11, so it's not like it came out just beforehand and I couldn't have predicted what happened and woe is me. No, wrote it after 9/11 because this was the time when the world was finally paying attention to these issues. Before 9/11, nobody gave a shit, whether in the faith or outside the faith. Finally, they gave a shit. For all the wrong reasons, I know, but there we were. And I knew that in writing a book like this, at this time, I'd be taking hell for it. And so I listened to the voice inside of me, the voice I naively thought was the voice of conscience, that actually was the voice of ego. Ego being that primal part of the brain that is constantly saying to us, don't worry, I'm here to keep you alive. I won't let you lose. You're gonna win. And that part of the brain said to me, Irshad, you know that once this book is published, you are going to be attacked because, and here comes what I can't control. This was true at the time, you're young. So your detractors will say, who the hell do you think you are? You're a woman. So your detractors will say, who the hell do you think you are? You're queer. And I had to be out about that because if I'm going to be asking my fellow Muslims to be honest, that life is complex. And so us against them, black and white, isn't going to bring justice because it doesn't dignify us as human beings or as sentient beings even. So I had to be out in order to lead by example. And that too would of course be a barrier to being heard. Again, who the hell do you think you are, you corrupter of youth, you abomination? And above all, weird but true, even though I'm Muslim, I was raised in the West. So really, how authentic could I be? For all of those reasons, my voice of ego, not conscience, said, you're really going to be taking it on the chin. So Irshad, don't be intimidated. When you are punched, probably only verbally, get ready to counterpunch. Show them you mean business. Show meaning them. Notice how I was already othering? Show them you mean business. You're not going to walk away in shame. And so that's exactly what I did, which is I showed them I mean business. There I am up on a major stage speaking my truth. There I am in Indonesia in front of a bunch of media microphones. There I am in Malaysia with a radio producer who, put the air gun to my head, and I thought that was just fun. What she was really saying is, you're on a suicide mission, girl, but hey, we yucked it up. It didn't even occur to me that what I was doing, the way I was doing it, the how, might not be the most effective. No, because I was on a mission. And I was going to show them I meant business. So what happened? I made what I now lovingly call the Manji mistake. Over and over and over. And you can use that phrase. I'm not a fan of my father's side of the family. So go ahead and use that phrase. The Manji mistake. The Manji mistake was, I had a tendency to turn potentially healthy discussions into debates. And hey, I love a good debate, don't get me wrong. Debates are wonderful for tournaments, but they're lousy for living. Because debates have one winner. And my ego is telling me, I'm not gonna let you lose. But of course, their ego is telling them, over my dead body will you lose. And so, any listening that may have been evident at first, we ratchet each other up, and all that listening goes out the window, right? But that's not all that happens, because I know you know that part. What wound up happening is that, well, I would make my critics even more defensive and therefore dogmatic than they intended to be, because I was doing this to them. Okay, but that's my critics. They deserve it, says the voice of ego. I also, over time, wound up making my supporters suspicious of my motives. Is she in this to move the needle? Or is she in this to play gotcha? And worst of all, I started doing damage to my own health. You know, there were times when I actually faced bona fide terrorists eye to eye. No problem. I was good in those moments. But years later, listening to a fellow professor's lecture at NYU, I started having panic attacks. And of course, the thing about panic attacks is they come out of the blue. You don't know why you suddenly can't breathe. Then I fell into a deep clinical depression. And at the most inopportune time, while I was getting made up in the makeup chair at NBC for the biggest interview of my life, I had a seizure. I remember what I was thinking just before that. So this was for the Today Show, morning show. And in the makeup room, of course, there's a bank of TV monitors. And I'm hearing all of this perky breakfast show chipper chatter. And something in me is saying, so, Irshad, this is what you do now. You call yourself an educator, huh? You proud of yourself? That you're practically living on a media set? This was, by the way, 2011, Arab uprising, Arab Spring, assassination of bin Laden, and everything that went with both. And so, yeah, I was living out of a broadcast studio. And I remember thinking, no, that's not what I'm here for. I am not proud of this. And I wasn't proud of it because not only is this not education, it's also that media, the beast, they don't need me. They don't need you. I remember thinking, if I died right now, that would be shocking. But they just cut to commercial. And then they'd have somebody else fill in the air. Because the show must go on. And I was sickened by the game that I allowed myself to be playing. That is when the panic attack, the depression, and the fed-upness of it all of that combined, and I snapped, and boom, down I went. And that was my body telling me, you can't keep going like this. It's not healthy. It's not healthy for you, and God knows it is not healthy for your cause. And so in that summer of recovery, I had to ask myself a really uncomfortable question. Irshad, why is it that when you are being disagreed with, you get so defensive. Why? You're not going to die. So why the anxiety? Why the panic? And that's when my assistant sent me a whole bunch of readings on neuroscience and social psychology and cognition, how we think and how we feel. And that is when I learned, my God, we are all of us born with a brain that has a primal region. And that primal region is constantly scanning for threat. And for reasons beyond the brain, but also because of the brain, we now take disagreement as threat. So instead of listening, I fight. As I was coming to terms with the trap that my ego brain was setting for me, I received an invitation from Al Jazeera. They wanted me to engage in a debate about whether Islam really does need reform. And the debater, you might know the name, Mehdi Hassan, super sharp, brilliant in fact, articulate like there's no tomorrow. And you know, debate is what got me in this mess. So I said to them, thanks, I'll do it. And I said that to them, not because I couldn't help myself. Oh, believe me, it took me a good many days to think this through. I accepted the invitation because I needed to test myself. Since I was so adroit at turning discussions into debates, could I do the reverse? And, Krista, where are you? Was it your book, The Four Agreements? Whose book was it? Somebody brought the book. Cheska, hold it up. I saw that book on the table here where Cheska was, and I said, I'm going to reference it. Because in order to prepare for turning a debate into a discussion, I had to make certain emotional agreements with myself. For example, I had to say to myself, yeah, he's good. He's really good. But that doesn't mean he's your enemy. All he is, in context, is your adversary. And when he asks you a gotcha question, you don't have to react to it. Take a breath. Pause. Process the question so you can turn the tables. When he makes a good point, because he will, oh hell, he will, acknowledge it as a good point. There is zero shame in recognizing that there are smart people other than you in this room. And you can see we were in front of a live audience. And so when somebody from the audience asks you, Irshad, a question for which you don't have a good answer, don't BS your way through it. People know when they're being played. Ask them. What's their advice? How would they have you think about it? And I remember during those tortured 44 TV minutes, I remember having to identify each of those agreements. Afterwards, cameras switched off, I beetled it out of that room because honestly, I didn't want to hear more criticism. I'd done the very best I could, and I just needed to be okay with that, however it landed. So I made it up to the reception room, grabbed some water, and waited to see if anyone would turn up. And a couple minutes later, a bunch of Muslim ministers, imams, with their long flowing robes, some with turbans, all of them with beards. No offense. I had one of my own this morning and I did some plucking. It's a South Asian girl thing. They walk in and I'm thinking, oh God, here we go. And they come up to me and they say, you're not the Irshad Manji we know. Tonight, you showed humility. Now, if I wanted to play gotcha, I'd have asked them, yeah, and how about your humility? When you interpret the Quran in such certain ways for your congregations, remember humility. But no, I did not want to play gotcha because something had changed. Suddenly, there was a degree of trust. And I said, thank you. I've really worked on myself. And they said, we can tell. And that's why we don't mind sharing with you. We support a lot of what you advocate. How is it that it took years for me to hear something like that? It took years because I wasn't motivating my others to open up about what they really believed. They didn't want to feed my ego. So it seemed like there was no support. I was alone in advocating, universal human rights. But it turns out that I was assuming things about them, and yeah, they were assuming things about me. And because of the way we engaged, bless you, because of the way we engaged, the how, we never found out until then what we actually do agree on. I learned that night that listening does not have to translate into losing. Because if you don't approach the issue in a win-lose way, but you approach it as wanting to learn, thank you, my sister, what is there to lose? And what is there to win? This is really important for us to understand today, folks. Because probably the most underappreciated fact about our fractured society is that we in America, we actually agree a lot more on various issues that we're told are polarizing. More and more research is coming out showing that we have a surprising amount of consensus right across the ideological spectrum on a lot of the issues that media and politicians want us to be polarized about. So what are we divided about? There is one thing we're divided about: each other. We don't trust each other. And because we don't trust each other, we don't engage each other in meaningful ways. Oh, sure, we'll drag each other on social and, our placards and, shout slogans like that's a starting point of a healthy conversation, which it never is. We don't engage each other in meaningful ways. And that is why we distract each other from all that we do agree on. Do you see how this becomes like a really ugly circle, a spiral? That's exactly the spiral that I encountered in my own activism. And it took only one person to break out of the either-or mold: me. And I did it for my own health, not because I thought that would be effective or influential. No, just because I needed to feel whole. But it turns out that when I did that for myself, it motivated many others to then open up because they didn't feel threatened opening up to me. And that's how I knew. Moral courage cannot simply be about speaking truth to power. That's the traditional definition. But I want to nuance it a little bit. Moral courage means speaking truth to power in here, even as we are speaking our truths to powers out there. Because this ego brain of ours, it's an overprotective parent. It really is. It means well. It exists to keep us alive, which is great in a truly existential moment. For example, if I'm about to step out in front of an oncoming bus, it's this part of the brain, the ego brain, that'll say, Irshad, get ready to fight this bus or flee like hell, right? The flight or fight option. Good when it's life and death. Not so good in the 99.9% of the other moments that we're in. And for reasons that we'll get into in just a second, we're treating many of those 99.9% of moments as life and death. They're not. And so, the truth that we need to speak to our own ego brains is, I love you, I respect you. But in this moment, I'm not gonna die. I'm only being disagreed with. So step aside. I got this. And that brings me to the next question. Here's the thing. Most of you can pick up on the fact that we have this ego brain as an inheritance from the days when our ancestors were hunter-gatherers, right? Because any little rustle in the bush could have been either a bird or a cougar. And so we had to develop this early warning system. Great. So the question is, if we've had this ego brain for 90,000 or so years, why is it so much more difficult to discuss issues without feeling contempt for one another almost right away? I mean, I'm 55, so I can tell you, I remember growing up at a time when we, as humans, disagreed with one another, sure. But I don't recall feeling like I needed to disdain the person I was disagreeing with. There is an emotional aspect to disagreement today. It's in social science called affective polarization, meaning emotional, driven by emotion polarization. Why is that happening so much more today, or at least it feels that way, than it did a generation ago? Kelly, I see your hand. I'll go to you in just a second. The question that I'm asking all of you is, what is going on out there in our wider culture that is collaborating with what's already happening in here to make us feel more anxious, more stressed, more defensive, and therefore less patient with one another? What's going on out there to amp up what's going on in here? Was that something, Kelly, that you wanted to jump in with? Go for it.
When I was a teenager, most of the people's opinions I heard were the people around me. And now I hear opinions from all over the world, all the time, constantly. And I think that we just have so much more pouring in that, for people to be heard, they have to ramp it up. And so things are getting more and more extreme because, it's the entertainment factor, I think, a lot online. People to be heard by more people and get more clicks, you have to be more extreme than the next person.
Right,
That makes me really anxious.
right, right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I think that the
That's
proliferation of media sources is the big.
huge, huge. Funnily enough, it feels like that is the reason, but I can assure you there's more to it. It's one reason, for sure. Turns out there are others as well. What else is going on? Sorry, yes.
Tagging on to what she was saying, I think social media has allowed people to be much stronger in their opinions, offensive sometimes because there's an anonymity behind that.
Right.
But even that has now moved into not being anonymous and people being more open about disagreements in a negative and a confrontational way.
Right. Brazen,
Yes.
shameless, really. Yeah, yeah. And so you can see how connected these two answers are, right? What else? Yes.
I've thought about this a lot actually, which is, and it builds off the other two comments, which is like this overwhelming amount of input and information is coming in all the time.
Yeah.
That it's removed the ability and the joy of contemplation in my life. So like I always think about like I don't really need to ever really think about anything because I can always just go and figure it out really quick or have access to information that I used to once have to like think and wander and sit with. Like I always remember being a kid sitting in the dentist's office and reading the highlights magazines and how that produced all this wonder about the world in me and all of this stuff that then I had to go over time and seek out information to gather, right? And now when you go to the dentist's office, you just get on your phone and you entertain yourself constantly. There's never any waiting or contemplating in life anymore. And so I almost have to find myself kind of intentionally doing that. And it's not an age thing either. I was just at Hogue a couple months ago and I was in the lab and I couldn't help but notice that I was the youngest person. There was a lot of senior citizens. Every single one of them was on their phone.
Right.
And I was the one that was sitting there trying to be like, no phone, I'm just gonna contemplate like I used to be. But I think that feeds the ego, and the access to information feeds the ego's desire to be right. So whenever I think that I'm wrong, I'll look it up, I'll Google it, and then I can start inputting information into me to tell my ego whether I'm right or wrong. And if I'm right, then I want to go debate you, and if I'm wrong, I like kind of silence myself. You know what I mean?
I sure do. Oh, yes. And by the way, one other thing I'll just add while it's on the brain to say. The phone and our instant access to information and, of course, misinformation feeds something else that the ego brain always needs, which is clarity. And by that I mean that because it's scanning for threat, it needs to know who's my friend, who's my enemy. Notice the binary, right? Who's reliable, who's unreliable, who's gonna hurt me, who's gonna help me. It wants answers right away because it thinks it needs to protect you, right? It needs to make sense of, thank you. It needs to make sense of what's around you so it can keep you alive. But because it's primal, it's not that smart. Meaning that once it thinks it has clarity, that guy, he's my enemy. Woo, good, okay, now I just need to avoid him. I've got clarity. But what if he's not my enemy? What if actually, if I got to know him just a little bit more, I could see that he could be a huge ally? All the ego brain wants is clarity, not accuracy. And that is what we get with instant access to information and misinformation. If I believe what I'm seeing, not only am I right, I've now got what I think is accuracy. All it is clarity that makes a mockery of accuracy. So what you've shared really allows us to go deeper into what's going on. Okay, are there any other factors you think about what's happening out there that amps up what's going on in here and that may not have to do completely with social media?
Well, I think I was gonna bring up something related, but I think we find ourselves in conversations and close proximity to people that we largely agree with. And then we're physically distancing and emotionally distancing ourselves from people that we don't agree with.
Yeah.
Or that we think we don't agree with.
Yeah.
And so I
More to
think
the point, we think we don't
we think
agree
we don't
with.
agree with, right? Because we're not exploring kind of what you've shared around what we do have as common ground. But I think that social media amplifies that with the algorithms.
That's right.
So then we're seeing and we're getting clarity.
Yeah.
An immediate kind of gratification around the questions that we have that do line up with our ideologies already.
Right.
And we're not being exposed to different thoughts. And I think we're doing that with human interactions as well.
Absolutely. And I'm gonna, you can think me a little anal around this, okay? Fine. But I'm gonna just rephrase a little bit of what you said. It's not that we're not being exposed to other points of view, it's that we're not making the effort to expose ourselves to other points of view, right? So we're falling into the trap and staying there far too often. I'm going to share with you the top 3 factors that social scientists are identifying about what's going on out there that amplifies what's going on in here. And we'll see some overlap, a lot of overlap, but there's even more than we've discussed right now. Okay, factor number 1, remote or hybrid. Remote or hybrid work, remote or hybrid learning. Could all of you just take a look at my feet right now? And I'm just going to walk from here to the orange tablecloth, okay? But please just look at my feet. Ooh, that looks nice. Sweet. Nothing, right? It's just whatever. And that's the point. When we are remote and or hybrid, we're spending less time together physically, which means that we're not traversing the common ground that we would in our offices. When I walked over, I made a comment about the pastry I saw in front of you, and I'm a very tactile person, so I have no qualms, even if I should, about grabbing you by the shoulder, and that's the kind of thing that we no longer do when almost everything we do is via Zoom. We're spending a lot more time with our immediate colleagues on the projects that we're working to deadline on. We're spending a lot more time with them and a lot less time with the people we would have otherwise bumped into in the hallways, at the proverbial water cooler, in the break room. And it was those interactions that lubricated bonding with our colleagues. So even the idea of being in one screen, your screen, my screen, that screen, yeah, we're part of the same meeting, but we have no common ground. So silly, so significant. Second, media ecosystems, which thrive on emotion, online and off. Now, we've already gotten into how social media, right, messes with our perceptions. So no need to do much more on that score. But even offline, media outlets play a huge role in the echo chambers that we're creating for ourselves. For example, back to when I was younger, there was such a thing as mass advertising. Today, no, none of it. In fact, niche advertising is not niche enough for most advertisers today. And they're not getting a whole great return on the money they're spending on hyper-targeting this or that group. So, media outlets know this. They need to make money somehow. So, legacy media, the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, et cetera, they have gone to a brand new business model. And that business model is subscribers. Now, quick thought experiment. When you allow $5, $6, $7 a month to be withdrawn from your bank account for any subscription, a streaming service, Amazon Prime, you do that. Why? Any thoughts? Why do you let $5, $6, $7 just be, withdrawn? Why do you subscribe, in other words, to anything that you subscribe to? How does it make you feel to get that service?
Needed access.
Need access?
I guess the New York Times app on my phone, and
Yeah.
I can just look up any articles.
That's right, that's right. I didn't ask, though, what it is that you get. I asked, how does it make you feel?
I don't know, that's a good, I like it, it's a convenience to have it there. I can just look up
Thank you.
anything anytime I want.
That's right.
and-
It's convenient. Feels good, right? Mm-hmm. Krista?
It can also be inconvenient because now I have all these services.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm too lazy to remove it.
Right. Krista, I think you need a, financial analyst to sit down with you. Okay? Let's talk afterwards, okay? Because, honey, you're going to feel so good once you know $10 is not being taken out of your bank account for stuff you don't want, right? But no, what got you subscribing in the first place? Was it that because of convenience? There's going to be some pleasure that comes from this, right? We do what we do to avoid pain. And so media outlets know this, which is why, forget the opinion side, we understand that, that's going to be skewed, even on the reporting side. Media outlets will hire people with certain sensibilities that will not offend their core subscribers. So even the reporting will be lopsided, not intentionally lying, not most media outlets, some I realize, not most. They will be sins of omission, not sins of commission, because they can't afford, literally afford, to lose too many subscribers, because that's where their bread and butter is. So you can see how the subscription model keeps people clinging to their prior convictions, right? And then all of this feeds into the third factor, which is politics is the new religion, and everything, hi Taylor Swift, hi ChatGPT, is politicized. Not that they themselves are political, but that they are being made politicized. What's fascinating for someone who is a person of faith is that we all live at a time when the influence of big religion, organized religion, is plummeting. Not just in America, many parts of the world. And you would think, well, then we're less religious. Oh, no, we're not. What has swooped in is politics. And I don't just mean party politics, Democrat, Republican, too easy, put that aside. I also mean the politics of the movements with which we identify. For example, I have a good friend who is an ardent environmentalist. One day, she was overheard questioning the science about one issue. And she was instantly told, obviously, you're one of them. You're not one of us. And she is still trying to regain trust with her fellow travelers, simply for asking questions. I have another friend who's a committed anti-abortion activist. When the Dobbs decision came down, he told somebody, you know, the only thing he regrets is that now women who have pre-existing health conditions are going to have a lot harder time getting the treatment that they need when they're pregnant, because it may very well be killing the fetus, or what he would call the baby. For his empathy of women with pre-existing health conditions, he was told he's complicit with murder. The point being that there are litmus tests of purity in many of the movements with which we identify and that we genuinely want to participate in. And so when you know that you're on a purity watch, is it really worth it to speak, to be complex, to offer nuance? I mean, life is enough of a gong show, right? Do you really want to invite more complexity into your life? The answer, of course, out of pure self-preservation is no. But the crazy thing is, you're balkanizing yourself at the same time. You don't have wholeness when you suffocate what you truly need to know or think you believe. And so you may be saving yourself from dishonor, from humiliation, from invalidation in the moment, but you're putting your nervous system through a shredder that is invisible until it's not. What a dilemma. And so you can see how what's going on beyond the clatter up here feeds the clatter up here. A politically committed friend of mine said to me not long ago, Irshad, you know the golden rule. I said, yeah, sure, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. He said, no, that was yesterday's golden rule. Today's golden rule is do unto others before they do unto you. Which goes back to my point. We don't trust each other. So we'll do unto others before we assume they're going to do to us. Yeah.
Irshad, the other point kind of takes me back to your number one there, but it's that we are assuming, like you said with them, that you're either it's us or it's them, and you generalized. I had a former employer, I worked for Disney, who came in and this VP said, you know, people will tell me Florida won't do it. You know, and he's like, the whole state? He's like, who said that? Like, let's go back and find out and have those discussions.
Right.
But we just generalize, right? It's HR won't do it, or you know, student affairs won't do it, or what have you. And that's how we are about politics and things like that.
That's
They're on the other team, they're on the
That's
other
right.
side, and we can't come to an agreement. And it's an assumption without thinking about each other as individuals, without that bonding.
That's exactly
You no
right.
longer think, you know, there's a whole lot that we may have in common.
That's
even though
right.
We have disagreements.
We objectify. Florida won't do it.
Right.
Florida isn't a human being, right?
Yeah.
So as you say, who?
Yeah.
And then, why? Maybe there's context there that I don't yet have and that I failed to ask about. Oh, you can't do it? Okay, yeah, sorry. No, tell me why not. Because maybe there's a way of acknowledging and taking into account that context and coming up with an alternate approach to what it is I'm hoping we can do, right? But that takes time. And we're under this misperception that there's a crisis of time. We've only ever had 24 hours in a day. I love it when my 18-year-old niece is scrolling, doom scrolling, and she's like, I don't have time. I don't have time. What are you doing right now? Wasting the time that you say you don't have. It's not a crisis of time. It's a crisis of trust. I don't trust that it'll be worth my effort. So as I say, the opportunity here is to become worthy of the trust of others. See, you can't expect others to become worthy of your trust. Because, and this is how vicious cycles work, they don't trust that if they make that effort, you're going to meet them in good faith. So you can't wait for them. You've got to make the first move. And that's if you want something to change. People say to me, especially when they're people of color or in some other ways, they belong to marginalized communities, you're making me do emotional labor. And I say, you can think of it as a burden. You can think of it as labor. You can also frame it as building out your toolkit. So that in fact, whatever disadvantage you think you have, you're turning it into an advantage because now you've got more tools in your toolkit than a lot of other people who think they can just breeze through life. But they won't be spared of adversity. Nobody is. This way, you get ready for it. Mo, you probably have something to say about that.
No, I have a question.
Bring it up.
Is that okay?
Absolutely. And then we'll get into the skills building.
Yeah, please.
Yes.
Maybe this is part of the skill or the transition in my brain to
Yeah.
skill building, but I understand everything you're saying and I'm taking it all in, individual to individual.
Yeah.
Derek and I might disagree on something, but I'm happy to sit with him and have a conversation. What happens when it's not so much a disagreement, but it's an annihilation of the concept of me as a human because I'm interacting with an institution or a community that wants me to disappear or that my ego brain thinks is under threat, right? So I think that it's a different interaction. So I would say I am happy to work on my trustworthiness as an individual with an individual.
Yeah.
Right there. Yeah, we're going there. But when it comes to how do I survive a set of rules, a set of policies, a set of institutional frameworks, a set of expectations on me, let's say as a faculty member trying to get tenure, that is so hard because it requires the institution to be trustworthy.
Yeah.
And without accountability, there's no trust.
That's right.
Right? So I think about our former president who right now is being held to account.
One hopes.
One hopes. In a system that maybe nobody trusts to bring perpetrators of wrongdoing to account. I think about that at the public health level. As an individual in public health, no one trusts the institution of public health. And no matter what we say to the world, that the pandemic isn't over, we've just moved to a different phase, but we're all in the YOLO phase somehow. And so, there's no trust. And so how do we, it's like in that space, I get you as an individual.
Yeah.
I don't know what that looks like, individual to institution.
Yeah.
Is it the same labor? Is it different labor? Is it for another time? No problem.
No, it's not for another time. I'm going to say one thing,
Please.
and I want you to just reflect on it, because it will require a longer conversation, but I'm happy to have that. In what I hear you say, and I hear this from a lot of people, it's not just you. One-on-one is great, Irshad. Interpersonal relationships, cool. But what about systems, right? And here's the thing. Systems are not monoliths. They're not these structures. I know that is interchangeable in the language that we use, systems and structures. They're not structures. Systems are not structures. Systems do not speak for themselves. Structures do not speak for themselves. It's the people who inhabit them who speak on behalf of those systems and structures. Just like religions. Religion doesn't speak for itself. It's nothing without the people who actually do stuff in its name. And that's where both the love and the danger are, right? So I believe we need to be rethinking how we view systems. The way I view them is they are webs of relationships. And relationships, by definition, are interactions between and among moving parts. Moving parts, not static parts. Which means that systems as webs of relationships are always changing, but imperceptibly. It's kind of like, the earth rotating. It's doing that right now. But we're not off balance because it's imperceptible. And so if you can, just for the moment, think about systems as webs of relationships, then you would be asking yourself, okay, what relationships do I need to either create or deepen? Actually, there's no either. Create, deepen, or heal in order to move my ball forward. And I want to say one other thing, and then we'll get into the skills. I recognize not every relationship can be healed. I will tell you right now, I joked several minutes ago about not being a fan of my father's side of the family. I have no relationship with my father. That's very intentional. It's not because he hurt me. I'm healed from that. It's because he hurt my mother to the point where, to this day, not only will he refuse to apologize for that and take accountability, he will joke about it to avoid accountability. That's a choice. Choices come with consequences. And a choice made repeatedly means that I have a choice, right? So, not every relationship can be healed, but you can. Many relationships can be healed or deepened or created. And my own relationship with my mama, against whom I was so angry for so many years because she didn't leave him soon enough. We now have the best relationship, and by best I mean we disagree like the Bickersons on all kinds of things, and we laugh about it. But somebody had to make the first move. With all of that in mind, let's get to some skills. And then I promise you that if not as part of the workshop, before I promise, Cecil, Liana, will I have time to hang out after the workshop for at least a bit of a Q&A? 10 minutes. Beautiful. Okay, 10 minutes or so if we don't get to the Q&A during the workshop. All right, so what I'm about to teach you is what we call the moral courage method of communicating across divides. Now, a couple of things I want to say about this. First of all, this will come up, I hope, I pray. Could you? Thank you. First of all, this is not I was going to actually go to the second point first. These are 5 skills, okay? Skills to do what? To lower your emotional defenses, and in turn, you will be lowering other people's emotional defenses at the same time. All right? Equally important, I want you to know the next bit. That because they are 5 skills that I'm about to teach you, it's easy to think, oh my God, I have to remember all 5 of these skills, and I've got to do them in order. No and no. These are standalone skills. So that as you're learning them, think to yourself, which one could I, knowing myself, as only I do, which one could I practice so regularly that I turn it into a habit? Because it's when a skill becomes a habit that it becomes very easy to deploy. In fact, at Moral Courage, we have a saying, practice makes painless. Not perfect. Practice never makes us perfect. We're human, we're never gonna be perfect. But it does make using any one of these skills, like any skills, painless. All right, so let's get to the first skill. Skill number 1, breathe deeply. We're all addicted to breathing. Let's make it worth our while. And here's what I've learned about myself. When I'm under stress, unless I'm really intentional, I stop breathing altogether. This is a problem because I'm preventing my brain from getting the oxygen that it needs to move from the hyper-emotional ego state to the more evolved state where emotion and cognition, thinking and feeling can coexist. So notice I'm not saying get rid of emotion. Oh gosh, no. No. Emotion is what keeps us human. Emotion includes love. It includes empathy. It includes grace. Those are pro-social emotions. No. Have your emotions. But recognize that it's easy to turn a setback into a catastrophe if we're only going to be emotional, right? We can't size up the situation very clearly unless we slow down the blood rush in our bodies, slow jam that ego brain, and think, what's really going on here? Am I being attacked? Or is that person just telling me a story that's very different from mine? Breathe deeply. Incidentally, this is one of the ones I've turned into a habit, and I can tell you later how I did that. Next, and again, not in order, maybe this is the one you want to turn into a habit. Don't merely seek common ground, create it. Create it. Seeking, you're leaving it up to chance. Finding, I don't have time for that. So be proactive. You can say something like, hey, Krista, I know that we're probably going to disagree about this issue, but I also know you're so much more than just this issue. Can you remember the same about me? Boom. That took all of 4 seconds. I recognize that I can't reduce you to what we're about to disagree on. And I just want you to remember that's true for me too. And by inviting that common rule of engagement, not only have you taken a step towards establishing trust, because I'm not playing gotcha, I'm going to hold myself to the same standard, but you've also just created common ground. Next, before making statements about what you believe, ask a sincere question about what your other believes. And the important word there, as you can see from italics, is sincere. Oh, we're so good, myself included, at asking judgy questions, right? Do you have any idea what you just said? Do you know what that actually means? Well, there's a question after that, question mark, I should say, after that. But come on, it's not a question. It's a judgment wrapped in a question, right? So it's got to be sincere. For example, how does this issue make you feel? Ah, there's the word feel. Hey, we're human. We're going to immediately analyze something first with our ego brain, which is the really emotional part of the brain. So start with the heart. Don't strain the brain. How does it make you feel? Or maybe you already know how it makes that person feel. That's why this is going to be a tough conversation. So another question you can ask, can you help me understand what I might be missing about where you're coming from? You're putting yourself in the shoes of their student. You're letting them be your teacher. For that moment, you're saying, I don't have anything to school you on before I'm schooled. That immediately again shows, I'm not here to turn this into a debate. I'm not here to get you. Next, you've asked them a question. Now you're going to listen, right? Well, as we know, there are multiple ways of listening. You can listen to win, which is not listening at all. You can listen to understand, which I've learned is a bit of a cop-out, because it's easy to say, oh, I hear you. Oh, no, I hear you. Now, about my agenda, you can also, though, listen to learn. And again, it goes back to the first comment we heard during this workshop. Why should we unify people when we disagree? Because we all have something to learn. It's so true. And research, by the way, shows that one of the ways human beings have flourished over millennia is by staying open to learning. So, you know you're listening to win, which is not good, when in the back of your head, you're thinking, oh, really, Derek? Really? Well, what about this? And what about that? The whole what about game? You're poking holes in the answer that Derek is giving me because I asked him a question. And here I am turning it into an argument. You know that's when you are listening to win. You know when you're listening to learn, when you can get really specific about what you're hearing from Derek and why you're grateful for it. So for example, thank you. Thank you because I never would have thought about the issue that way. I don't know that I'm convinced, but I'm taking time to just absorb what you're telling me. And I couldn't have thought about it that way because I'm not you. So thank you for showing me a new way of thinking about it. Or if you just don't know what to thank them for because it's just craziness, right? Thank you for taking the time that, everybody's time is precious. And I really appreciate the time that you've given me. But notice that slows you down. And it also shows sincere gratitude that whatever that person has done, they've made an effort to do. They didn't have to. They could have flipped you the bird and left, right? So listen to learn, not merely to understand, and certainly not to win. And finally, this is a beautiful little skill, and apologies for the bar at the very bottom, but ask another question, starting with 3 simple words. Tell me more. Research and experience show that those 3 words break open the honesty of a conversation because those 3 words are unassuming, they're utterly inviting, and they telegraph to your other, you can still trust me. I'm still listening. You still have the floor. Quick story here. My organization certifies people to become mentors of these skills in their own workplaces. And those workplaces include police departments. We have a deputy chief of police who is a certified moral courage mentor. After he became certified, he happened to be given the very unsavory assignment of figuring out what to do with an encampment of the unhoused right in front of City Hall. And it's not just that there was an unhoused encampment. That wasn't the problem. The problem was that there were allegations of sexual assault running rampant within the encampment. So people who are already vulnerable, a cohort of them being made even more vulnerable. And it's this guy's assignment to figure out, what are we going to do? He goes to a town hall about not this issue particularly, but general issues around the unhoused. And the lead activist is so angry, so anxious, that she just insults every one of the city commissioners as much as she can in as little time as possible. And you already know by now that, you know what, if you're not going to be engaged in a dignified way, you're not motivated to listen. And of course, these city commissioners were not motivated as a result. So they shut down the town hall early. The deputy chief of police, his name is Victor Green, goes up to the lead activist and he says, look, I know you didn't get the hearing that you deserved. I'm sorry for that. Here's my card. My name is Victor. I'm the deputy chief here. I'd really love for us to sit down and have a conversation. Maybe we can figure out something together. Now, what I haven't told you yet is that Victor is a black man. The activist looks at him and says, you are the deputy chief? You're nothing but a token. It would have taken nothing for Victor's ego brain to kick in. Who the hell do you think you are? You don't know me from Adam. We haven't had 2 words with each other. Don't you dare assume about me. Let me tell you, lady, how hard I've worked to earn this position. Instead, Victor took a deep breath and he said, tell me more. What could she tell him? But here's the thing. Victor didn't rub the awkward silence in her face. He just pressed his card into her hand again and said, please, I mean it. I'm sincere. Give me a call when you're ready. Next week, she calls him. First thing she does, I'm so sorry. I saw your uniform. I was triggered. I've only ever been treated belligerently at the hands of police. I assumed something about you that I shouldn't have. He didn't need the apology, but of course, he happily accepted it, and they sat down and they worked it out. My point being that even in moments of high emotion and high stakes, working with a huge power disparity, where it's true, the person with the most power is the one who's exercising these skills, not the other way around. Totally get it. Nonetheless, the fact that even people in powerful institutions know they need the collaboration, at the very least the cooperation of others to get stuff done. That is when these skills really work their magic, when you want to get stuff done. And so that brings me to a 5-minute video that I'd like to play for all of you. And this is, what? I thought we were ending at 1:30. Oh my goodness. Okay then. Well, in that case, boy, that was a big miss on my part. I'm so sorry. Well, at least we got through the skills building part. I know many of you have taken notes, and I didn't stop you from doing so because sometimes that's how we learn, right? But we also have a 1-page handout for everyone, summarizing these skills and giving context. And so as I let you go, my question for all of you, and I just want to take a quick poll here, quick poll. You've learned the 5 skills. You know now that it's all about practicing one of them, right? Kind of like, if you're learning a sport or a foreign language or a new instrument, you can know how these things work, but you can't play any of them or do any of them impactfully unless you practice, practice, practice. So, of the 5 skills, and let's actually bring those up one more time, and let's hand out the 1-pager.
You wanna go back?
Yeah, can we go back to there we go. Of the 5 skills, how many think that knowing themselves as only you do, how many think you'll be habituating breathe deeply? Okay, all right. And by the way, you're not limited to 1, but don't overcommit is what I'm saying. How many think, I'm gonna try to create common ground, not just seek it? How many think it'll be about asking a sincere question before I make a statement? Kelly, I like that. So will your husband, I know. Okay. How many say, I'm gonna listen to learn, not merely to understand, and definitely not to win? Wow, very good. And finally, tell me more. Right? Right? That is so easy to remember, and yet you can think that right now because you're not in a moment of being triggered. That's why you've got to practice, 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 and figure out a way of practicing that fits into your daily routine. I'll leave you with this. I'm a lousy morning person, really bad, okay? And so the way I have habituated breathing deeply is that I work that into my routine before I get out of bed. It gives me more time to get out of bed, but also when I've taken the final 5th deep breath, that's a signal to my body I've run out of excuses. I now have to drag my ass out of bed. And because I do that every morning, I will tell you, it comes in, it comes naturally now, but it also comes in so handy. It's gotten me out of more jams than I care to admit. So think about, how can I make this part of my routine so that even then, it becomes easy to practice. Pick just one. And once you've habituated that, pick another. I'm so sorry that we went over time, and I'm gonna hang out for another 5 minutes before they drag me out of here. So please feel free to, the books, oh my God. Okay, look, there were so many good interventions here. So what are we gonna do? How do you recommend that we give away the books? To the students in the room? Yeah? Okay. I'll tell you what. I'm going to make this good. Within the next week. That's not it. Within the next week. Hold on. We're getting there. One more. There we go. Within the next week, go to moralcourage.org/tools. You will find a bunch of snackable tools on that page. Email Liana with the 3 that you have found most useful. She will forward those emails to me, and based on what I hear, what I read, I will either pick the 3 individuals who get the books, or all of the people who have emailed Liana with 3 of the snackable tools that they're using will get the books, and I will supplement over and above the 3. Does that sound fair? Yeah? I will also autograph all of them. So these 3 I'll autograph while I'm here. I'm just letting Liana and Cecil know. And the ones that I supplement with, I'll send you autographed copies of them. Thank you all so much.